Why American companies usually fail in Europe. This should be a good one. We've done a couple of videos like this before, covering some of these corporations that have gone over to Europe and basically just fallen flat on their face. One that comes to top of mind was Domino's. I think we did where Domino's tried to go sell pizza in Italy and other parts of Europe. I know Domino's is still kind of there, but yeah, I always think it's going to be some specific reason that they fail. And then the actual reason is something that I completely did not expect. So I'm excited for this one, coming from the channel The Invisible Game. I'll have a link to their video down in the description below. Go check them out, show them some love. But without further ado, let's dive in.
On the 30th of December 1997, America's largest grocery chain, and at the time the world's largest company, Walmart, opened its first store in Germany. At the grand unveiling, the company spokesperson announced this as the first step to taking the continent. But just 9 years later, after expanding to 85 stores across Germany, Walmart seized all its European operations, reporting losses of more than $1 billion. This was just one example of countless massive American companies who have tried to conquer Europe and failed. Staples tried in 1998, Home Depot in 2001,
Okay, I had heard about Walmart. I didn't hear about Staples or Home Depot, though. Why don't you guys like Home Depot? I love going to Home Depot. All right, we gotta find out.
In 1998, Home Depot in 2001, and even Best Buy in 2010. All of them failed.
Best Buy too?
What was it that they were doing wrong? After all, they came from the land of capitalism, had large budgets, and enough experience to crush the competition. Yet almost 9 times out of 10, they failed.
A retail giant is closing stores. Walmart plans to shut down 269 stores. Best Buy is laying off thousands of workers.
That's such a fail.
Even though sales there are soaring.
In 2023, European customers spent more than $9 trillion, making the EU the second largest consumer market in the world, behind only the United States. To most people, this didn't really come.
Let's just talk about these stats really quick. You guys have almost double the amount of people than us, yet we have almost double the consumption. That is fucking embarrassing.
In the world, behind only the United States. To most people, this didn't really come as a surprise. After all, just like the US, multiple European countries rank among the wealthiest and most developed on the planet. And with similar populations and similar sized economies, you'd be forgiven for thinking Europe and America basically run the same ways. But in many ways, the two blocks couldn't be further apart. In 2023, about 700 million people lived in Europe, but only about 10% of them spoke English as their official language. Home to over 40 different languages, Europe is vastly different from the US. While something like language may seem trivial, this difference is just one of the many symptoms of something deeper. Something that explains why American companies struggle in Europe. In the 1960s, Dutch psychologist Geert Hofstede set out to answer a simple question. Why do people from different countries behave so differently? And by 1980, that work became known as Hofstede's cultural dimensions, a framework for understanding how culture shapes behavior, broken down into 6 key dimensions.
Hold on here, what do we got here?
Understanding how culture shapes behavior, broken down into 6 key dimensions.
Indulgence versus restraint, power distance index, individualism versus collectivism, long-term orientation, masculinity versus femininity. I said that kind of weird. Uncertainty avoidance index. Okay.
One of these dimensions, uncertainty avoidance, measures how comfortable a society is with unpredictability. And this is where things start to go wrong for American retailers. You see, in the US, uncertainty avoidance gets a score of about 46. This means Americans are generally more relaxed about rules, comfortable with experimentation, and okay figuring things out as they go. American companies also tend to operate the same way. They test things, pivot quickly, and then adapt on the fly. Some European countries like the UK also fall into this category, but move a bit to the east and that picture changes fast, with countries like Germany scoring as high as 65, meaning they prefer things spelled out, standardized and formal. So when American companies show up with their "we'll figure it out as we go" approach, German consumers often find this disturbing. In 1997, Walmart opened its first store in Germany, and just like its US locations, all employees were given the company handbook.
Yes, I remember learning about this. weren't they? I think they were like forced to say "Have a good day" or "Thank you" everywhere. It came off very fake to the German people. It's been a while since we checked out that Walmart
rules.
video,
But in the culture section, there was one rule that took priority over everything else. Whenever a customer comes within 10 feet of you, you must look them in the eye, greet them, and ask them how you can help them. To Americans, this was considered good customer service. But to Germans, with their high uncertainty,
honestly, it's a little annoying. It happens a ton. Usually when I go in and shop now, I just put my headphones in and walk around, but still, it's like you could walk into any store and literally be through the door, and within 10 seconds, it's true. Within 10 seconds, somebody's already approaching you, asking you to help. And it's like, dude, I just walked in. Like, I'm okay right now. You can leave me alone for a little bit. I'll come find you if I need help. It's excessive. It's also nice though, you know, because there are points when I'm in Home Depot and I'm trying to fix something and I need to find someone, you know, that's when I am really hoping that someone would come up. Maybe it's just the Home Depot store because I'm trying to find a specific part or something, but yeah, it can be a little crazy sometimes.
Shopping at Walmart was
especially like
disaster.
the grocery store.
The friendliness
like,
felt
leave me
fake.
alone.
The small talk intrusive, and constant smiling unprofessional. Customers thought, why is this stranger trying to talk to me? And in some cases, this friendliness was even misinterpreted as sexual advances. Instead of building trust, it created discomfort. And finally, after 9 years of poor sales, Walmart had to pull out of Germany. Another one of Hofstede's dimensions, long-term orientation, measures how societies balance tradition with change. Here, the US scores relatively low, which means Americans would generally replace old methods of doing things for newer, more efficient ones, something American companies have always been used to. Countries like the UK and Germany, however, which score much higher, tend to value long-standing traditions, established norms, and gradual change. In other words, they don't switch to new ways of doing things just because they're more efficient. And that brings us to Best Buy. In 2010, the American retail giant tried bringing big box stores to the UK. Their pitch? Bulk shopping was way more efficient.
Also, I'm going to say really quick, you guys have to have some type of electronic store that's similar to Best Buy if Best Buy didn't make it there, right? I would assume so. I mean, you got to go get electronics, and not everyone likes ordering stuff from online, but I enjoy going to Best Buy quite a bit, and I think it's just because I'm like a very gadget-driven guy, and I love like testing things out. I was just in Best Buy maybe like a month and a half ago looking at 3D printers and TVs and whatever else. It's a real joy for me to go into this store. Crazy that it didn't succeed.
In the UK, however, shopping in small quantities had always been the norm, and with their tendency to stick with things like that.
I wouldn't really call Best Buy, also, I hate to pause it again, but I wouldn't really call Best Buy a bulk store. Like, you don't go to Best Buy to buy 5 TVs in bulk. Like, you just go to get one, or a phone case, or whatever the hell you're getting. A washer, a dryer.
However, shopping in small quantities had always been the norm, and with their tendency to stick with things like they already used to, Best Buy felt unnecessary. And after years of barely any business, Best Buy had no choice but to pack up and leave. Time and time again, American companies have struggled in Europe, not because their business models are bad, but because they kept trying to sell the American way of doing things to people who don't really care for it. It simply didn't work. But that didn't mean American success in Europe was entirely impossible. Once companies accepted that European consumer culture was fundamentally different, they stopped trying to copy and paste the American model, and started building Europe-specific playbooks instead, all in an effort to navigate those differences and cash in on the continent's vast consumer market. But as they quickly discovered, this was going to be easier said than done, because unlike what they were used to, Europe wasn't just another market. It was a collection of different values, cultures, and people that had just happened to share the same continent. In 1985, Domino's Pizza opened its first store in Europe, located in Bedfordshire, England. Unlike its US locations, which were mostly large restaurants, things in the UK were completely different. Brits didn't eat out nearly twice as much as Americans did, so instead of opening large suburban restaurants, Domino's focused on small stores in student-packed areas that prioritized delivery over dine-in. And it worked. By 1999, they'd expanded to over 200 stores, and in less than a decade, that number had more than doubled.
Okay, we didn't cover in the Domino's video we did. I think it was only covered really in Italy. We didn't touch at all on the UK. Can't talk. All right, let's go.
From Domino's perspective, the lesson was clear. They'd found a winning model. And for an American company, that meant one thing: scale it. You see, for decades, these companies have been trained to replicate whatever works, and it all comes down to how the US is structured. With shared language, media, and consumer expectations, the US is more or less a unified market, so a strategy that works in one part of the country will almost always work everywhere else. This is why Walmart can roll out identical stores nationwide, why McDonald's sells the same menu in every state, and why Coca-Cola can use the same marketing campaign from California to Virginia. So when Domino's executives saw their delivery-first strategy take off in the UK, expanding it across Europe didn't feel risky, but instead like the next logical step. By 2012, they'd expanded to Germany, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein, and for a moment, it seemed like they'd cracked the code, up until it didn't.
Domino's Pizza is to close down all its stores in Italy.
Shut down all of its locations in Italy.
Domino's has reportedly closed its last branch
after it failed to win over Italians with its mass-produced pizzas.
In 2015, Domino's entered Italy, the birthplace of pizza, with its European playbook.
Just a wild, crazy idea for them to try and go into Italy. I still am baffled by that.
Pizzas as fast as possible and delivering it to people's doorsteps. But in Italy, pizza wasn't just another meal. It was their culture, something that had been crafted with care and eaten straight out of an oven. Domino's, of course, ignored this. After all, its European strategy was working in other parts of the continent, so why wouldn't it work here? Just 7 years later, the company collapsed, filed for bankruptcy, and shut down all 29 locations across the country, a fraction of the nearly 800 it had once projected. This
Also, they opened up way too many stores way too fast.
One Europe strategy isn't exactly unique to Domino's either. In the 1980s, Coors, the American beer company, successfully expanded to the UK with its Turn It Loose advertising campaign. British consumers loved it, so they scaled the campaign to Spain. But when it launched, Turn It Loose was immediately interpreted as a common Spanish expression meaning suffering from diarrhea.
Oh my gosh. How did they miss that? Did they not have one Spanish guy on like the marketing and brand team to catch that?
Just like that, the brand image was destroyed. Time and time again, American companies have failed in Europe because they underestimate the time, money, and commitment required to succeed there. They treat Europe like the US, a collection of similar markets with minor variations. But in reality, Europe is far too diverse for this logic to work. In other words, a product that sells well, or a marketing campaign that resonates in one European country, won't necessarily work in another, even if they share a border. Many American companies have struggled to adapt to this, and even when they recognize the problem, they often choose to ignore it, because building country-specific strategies is expensive, slow, and difficult to scale. But Europe hasn't responded to this resistance with indifference. As American companies try to force their methods into European markets, Europe pushes back. And in 2024 alone, that pushback cost American companies more than $7 billion.
$7 billion?
American companies dominate globally, but fail in Europe, and it's not just because of cultural misunderstandings or bad.
That's Costco. We did do a Costco video that is in Paris the other day, so hey, Costco's getting a little bit of traction, but I did read some of the comments, and yeah, there were a lot of French clowning on some of the food inside of that Costco.
Strategies. It's that their entire business models are built around a version of capitalism that just doesn't exist there. In the US, capitalism has always been straightforward. For the most part, government stays out the way, creating an environment where companies can take more risks, expand more aggressively, and then take the most amount of profit possible, even though this sometimes means engaging in child labor. In Europe, however, things are
child labor behind smartphone and electric car batteries are failing to do basic checks to ensure cobalt mined. Oh, okay, not in America. Yeah, we've heard about this. I remember I saw this get talked about and like publicized a lot. I think on Rogan, like years ago.
A little bit different. Capitalism does still exist, but the government steps in to balance growth against other priorities like worker protections, consumer rights, fair competition, and environmental standards. And even though the amount of regulation in Europe has recently been brought under scrutiny, for American companies this causes massive issues. In 1997, when Walmart entered Germany, It did the same thing that had made it successful in the US. It leveraged its relationship with manufacturers, got massive bulk discounts, and offered customers the lowest prices on the market. In less than a month, it received an official letter from the German government: raise prices or face penalties. You see, instead of trying to
German competition regulators accused Walmart stores of being too competitive today and ordered the giant retailer to raise its prices for household staples like milk, flour, butter, rice, and cooking oil. All right, interesting.
compete, German retailers simply reported Walmart to the authorities for selling products below cost. Walmart executives, who'd built their entire business on being able to offer the lowest prices, were left confused. To them,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm a little confused as well. I know that there's more information behind it, but it's pretty wild that they got mad that they were selling stuff too cheap.
but in Germany, it was a violation of fair competition laws. And complying
Okay,
didn't mean
fair
tweaking a
competition
few
laws.
policies. It meant stripping away the very thing that made Walmart, Walmart. Its competitive
I guess
pricing.
it's how you keep
After
a
9 years of
monopoly
struggling,
from
it
happening.
sold off all its stores, exiting with nearly $1 billion in losses. For decades, American companies have built their entire business models without strict regulations, controlling what they can and can't do. This has led to a situation whereby when said regulations are introduced, their entire business model falls apart. With labour laws that protect employees, Amazon can't cycle through workers to maintain a consistently motivated workforce like it.
Dude, Amazon. I know somebody who worked at Amazon, and that place is a hellhole. I don't know what it's like over in Europe with Amazon. You guys, pretty sure you guys have Amazon. I know the UK does at least, but gosh, dude, that's why they're having robots. That's why Amazon's gonna have robots working all the warehouses and all the jobs.
Does in the US. And with privacy laws that protect people's data, Meta can't bombard Europeans with targeted ads, its main revenue source. And with competition laws that protect smaller businesses, Walmart can't operate efficiently in Europe. And it's not just that these regulations exist, it's that they're actually enforced, something American companies are all but used to. In 2023 alone, Meta was fined over $1 billion for violating privacy laws, Apple $500 million for anti-competitive practices, and Intel over $400 million for abusing its market position. In fact, Alphabet, Google's parent company, has been fined so many times by the EU that it now has a dedicated section for these fines in the balance sheet. In the US, however, companies barely get punished for things like this. No fines, no breakups, no.
Yeah, I think that the U.S. doesn't have enough regulations, or maybe let me rephrase that. Not the right regulations, because there are a good amount of regulations in the U.S. It's just a lot of them are completely backwards. Meanwhile, I have seen that I've heard it. I'm not gonna be around the bush with you guys. There is a little bit of overregulation in some of the European countries. Not all of them, but in general, there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through. And the US just doesn't have enough, and also the wrong ones.
Consequences. Where American capitalism rewards whoever can grow the fastest, European capitalism balances growth with social welfare. And while this means European companies are often less dominant than their American counterparts, that's always been the plan. It's about confronting the fact that their entire business model, the strategies, the tactics, and the competitive advantages that made them successful, was designed for a version of capitalism that simply doesn't exist in Europe. And adapting would require becoming a fundamentally different company, which for most of them just isn't working. For decades,
Or they
American
just didn't
companies
want to
have
do it.
thrived on a simple formula, finding out what works and scaling it no matter the cost. But in Europe, things have always operated on a different logic, one where cultural nuances matter, where stability is valued over disruption, and where regulations exist, not to slow down businesses, but to protect the people those businesses serve. So for American companies to succeed in Europe, they must be willing to put in the work, because at the end of the day, Europe isn't a single market waiting to be conquered. It's a dozen different markets, each with its own language, culture, and way of doing business. And until American companies truly accept that, they'll keep making the same billion-dollar mistakes for years to come.
I wonder what would be an American company that has actually succeeded in Europe. If you guys know of one that you see all the time, let me know in the comments below. All right, I thoroughly enjoyed that video quite a bit. That was really, really good. I'm like a sucker for this kind of content and information. It's really eye-opening and gives me a different perspective on just the entire world. So, all right, I'm getting out of here. Appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.